Welcome back to Pod Places. I'm Jeff Sigler with Revitalize or Die here in Pittsburgh.
What's up, guys? Ryan with Civic Brand.
And I'm Phil Ike with a Storyville Social.
You got a new name there, huh?
I do. It's snazzy and new, isn't it?
Wow.
It's all compliments of Ryan Short and the branding genius over at Civic Brand, because I would have called it something stupid. Yeah, he steered me.
Phil's social media outlet, LLC. It always reminds me of The Simpsons. He's like, I need a great name. Compu Global Hypa Meganet. Like, that's it.
1,000% that would have been my name. I'm like, well, this idea is good, and this idea is good, and this idea is good. So let's just combine them all.
So we got the band back together. It's Phil, it's been a while since we've had you on. You've been busy.
Yeah, and it is great to have the band back together. Been super busy. You know, there was a part of me with COVID and shutdowns happening that life was going to slow down a little bit. But it was just like hitting the gas pedal because social media became the only way for businesses and cities to communicate with people. So it was almost like desperation, people reaching out. So it's been a really, really crazy, an awesome few months because I've been able to help a lot of people, but it's also been very crazy. So I'm ready for a little bit of downtime.
Excellent. Now, Ryan, I don't want to assume your faith or nationality, but did you and your family celebrate Thanksgiving?
We did a little just our household kind of thing, just with us and the kids, and just had a kind of a chill week. It was nice. That's kind of the only, true holidays are the only time when clients kind of really stop calling you and bugging you and needing stuff. So it was good to kind of have a true break and quiet week. Cool. What about you?
Yeah, great one. Again, same, quiet. I mean, that's how I like Thanksgiving. It's the best holiday. There's no, I mean, it is eating and drinking, and you might do some puzzles. You might read. I don't know. Maybe watch some football. It's up my alley.
Yeah, well, I think the holidays I found where you do something out of the ordinary from what you normally do, and the ones that are just smaller, like it's just there's something special about those, I think.
It's a less busy holiday, which is great. You know, like Christmas. I love Christmas. I'm a Christmas super fan. But Christmas, you got in a regular year, you've got Christmas with this family and with this family and with this family. And I drive to this house in the morning and I drive to this house in the afternoon, and it's just like weeks and weeks and weeks of Christmas, and you're just going and going and going. But Thanksgiving, it's super low key. You just wake up, make a lot of food, eat all the food, sit around. Done.
Yeah. It's not a hard one to pull off. I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Speaking of Christmas, segue warning. Choo choo choo. Our own branding guru Ryan put out a piece of genius this week on December 1st, the Proud Places Advent Calendar, and it is fantastic. Really digging it. It's been fun. I've loved the ideas, and it's been cool to see how other people are using it. So Ryan, what'd you do there?
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to think of what to come up with for, my contribution to Proud Places this month. And I don't know, I mean, as a kid, we always did the Advent calendar and I always loved it. I'd come out and, open the thing and get the little chocolate and do something. And it was just something to look forward to every day. And we talk about here on Proud Places all the time that, it is just about like little small things that you do that make your community. It's not these big planning projects. It's just the little tiny things, but it's the consistency every day. And so I was like, man, that'd be cool to take a lot of these ideas that we talk about of, supporting local businesses and, picking up trash and pulling weeds and doing all those things, and just give people an Advent calendar that it's a simple task. Anybody can do it. And it's something to look forward to and do every day. And it's been really fun, to be honest, just like watching. I'm a couple hours behind you guys time zone wise. And so by the time I wake up, seeing all these communities have already done all these things, and people are sharing what they've done. And to me, that's the coolest part. Just thinking about, the first one, day one, was leave a 5-star review for a local business. And that's a thing that, like, I'm not a big review guy, so I don't normally do that. I do support local businesses, but just thinking about all the local business owners that woke up that morning with a smile on their face because they're like, oh, it's cool. Like somebody left me a 5-star review. So it's this snowball effect that we're just every day putting smiles on people's faces. And so, yeah, I think it's been fun just watching how communities have run with it.
I think one of the most important pieces of this too is just the unknown of it. Like, when I used to coach CrossFit, like the thing that kept people coming to the gym every day was they had no idea what the workout of the day was. Like they showed up to the gym, they had no idea, and it was surprise. Here's this brand new thing. You're gonna run, lift weights one day. You're gonna do this the next day, and it was just such a motivating factor for people because there's this little thrill of I don't know what I'm going to see. And so when you go to this advent calendar and you click number 4, it opens up and you say, oh, like I can definitely pick up trash on my way to work. And then you go out and you pick up the trash and you've checked that box. Whereas if it's, here's a list of the 25 ways that you can help your community, everybody's going to go, yeah, and then they're going to forget about it.
I'm throwing a timeout in here, like CrossFit instructor. Like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I mean, I knew that you were like a professional organ player. I knew that you were a teacher. I knew that you used to build guitars, and that you're on a sort. But you apparently were a cross. Like, what the hell, man?
Yeah, when when I left originally when I left teaching, that was I was building guitars with my brother on the side, and my goal was to make CrossFit coaching my career. That was my goal. So I went around, did all the certifications, and did that. Coached a ton of really talented athletes, but that career path didn't pan out, obviously.
Uh,
But it was
Fortunate for
amazing.
us. Yeah, I'm glad
Yeah.
it didn't really work for you.
I was in the best shape of my life, man, because I'd get there and like coach the 5 a.m. class and then have a couple hours, like I'm gonna work out and coach class and then work out again. I was in the best shape of my life. But then I had a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
So
So there goes everything. Yeah,
yeah.
it's I really dig the action oriented nature of it. I
Yep.
mean, that is what we miss. It's like I almost think that planning, the field of planning has sort of convinced communities that they can't do anything without a plan, and that everybody waits, and that everybody's constantly being told sort of what to do, and that's keeps communities from ever progressing. Like, I find that to be a big cause of apathy, is that everybody's always waiting to find out what the right thing to do is, instead of just acting. And acting is, it's sort of like, well, yeah, I'd get out of bed today, but nobody's sort of giving me the specific instructions of
Yeah.
what to do. Or everybody wants a coach, everybody wants a CrossFit coach. So you kind of need to take some action, and this is just that, like simple, easy things you can do. So yeah, I'm not a review guy either. Went right away and hit 3 Yelp reviews and felt good about it. And yesterday, yeah, picked up a little trash in the dog walk, and even looked up the history of the movie Striking Distance this morning when today's came
I
out.
saw that. I think too, like we typically live under this impression that it's these things are always somebody else's responsibility. Even if it's not willful, even if like that's not my job, that should be the city's job. Like we just kind of live under this cloud that somebody else should be doing that. That's somebody else's role. That's somebody else's responsibility. But when you look at something as simple as like leaving a review, like that's our responsibility. Like we won't we can say shop local all you want, but if you're not actually doing concrete things to support those businesses, nobody else is doing that either. Like, and if you think about the nature of that action, like what if a business owner woke up one day and 50 people from their community decided to leave them up 5-star reviews? That could be world changing for that
Yeah.
business. Like all of a sudden that business explodes because nobody knew about that pancake shop until these 50 reviews came out of nowhere. Like you've just changed somebody's life in 2 seconds of work, and that's our responsibility.
100%. And right, and I think kind of the action uh muscle, if you will, needs a little exercise. Like, it needs some practice to get used to it, to get used to, like, oh yeah, I can just go and do this thing. I can just immediately pick up. I can make a difference in all these little
Yeah.
ways. And as you start to use that, as you get more in the habit, you then get more in the habit. I always remember, and we were in a community doing an assessment, and so like kind of pointed out like, yeah, you've got all this trash and cigarette butts in the tree wells, and she's like, well, yeah, the city can't. The mayor was like, city staff can't do that every day. And the woman we were with is like, we've created a culture in my community where citizens pick up, where we realize like it's our responsibility. And it was sort of mind blowing. Like, yeah, that's right. It is. If you practice that sort of thing, if you remind people that you own this place and it's up to you to take care of it, those things start to become habit, and people then do it, which is we're right, because you can't fix everything from a city. Like city staff only is limited. You have to cultivate that, and I really love that this is kind of doing that.
I just had an interview yesterday with a couple that wrote a grant. Their neighborhood wrote a grant to get, I think it was like 36 ash trees planted in their neighborhood because the forestry division in the city went defunct in like 1980 or something like that. So nobody was replacing trees that were being cut down. So the neighborhood said, well, let's write a grant and get our own trees. And they wrote a grant, got 36 ash trees, and they're beautiful, amazing trees, and they go out every single year and protect them with like pesticides from the ash borer. They take care of them, and that's that neighborhood's trees because they decided one day they were going to write a grant and make their neighborhood more beautiful.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think kind of like you said before, but I mean, I think we even just need to remind ourselves to do these things because I mean, our audience at Proud Places, it's a lot of Main Street folks, downtown people, urban plan, like people that already get it. They know all of these things to do. And I've even had days where I'm like writing an article about supporting a small business, talking on a podcast about it, but then I'm like, but did I actually do anything to help that business? You know, and so sometimes I think we need to, it kind of becomes the ivory tower kind of problem. And it's like, well, sometimes we need to come down and just do it and do some things and not talk about it so much.
Yeah, over the last summer, maybe it was 2 summers ago. I can't remember, but it was, complained about my little neighborhood shopping district a couple times, and the weeds were everywhere. And it's like, wait, stop. Like, all right, kids, you've all been on your screen too much. Let's go. And we went with screwdrivers and trash bags, and we pulled every weed. It's just a block long, so maybe it took us an hour and a half. But pulled every weed there. And can't tell you how many shop owners came out and were like, oh my God, thank you so much. We've called the city all these times. We've been meaning to do that. And it's like, yeah, it didn't take anything. It barely took anything to do it. It was just the decision to do it. And how often we overlook that and think like, oh, if somebody, when can somebody come along and fix this? And like, you're that person.
Yeah, and it's contagious. People see you doing it and they start doing it. People see you share the history of your town and they share the history of their town. And that's how like change actually happens, because if just one person did it, it really wouldn't make that much of a difference. But people see them and you share it. And so, yeah, I think that's the kind of, I kind of wrote, that's the kind of viral we need this year. Not, so.
Yep.
We got some free lunch out of it too. It wasn't the attention, but it did happen.
Nice. Yeah. Win-win.
It has been very cool to see people use it, see people share it, to see the comments that people are clearly finding some pleasure in it. And I think that that's something that is easy to overlook, is like, you think it's such a onerous to ask somebody to do these things, and you forget like doing good things makes you feel good. It makes your day better. It improves your life. It makes like it's a very selfish act, and people forget that when you do something nice, you feel really good. And that's totally the response I've seen online, is people like, I did that and I felt pretty good about it.
1000%. And I agree with the idea that self-care is important and you have to take care of yourself and things like that. But my fear is that the momentum behind self-care becoming more of a thing is that it turns us again into ourselves. Like we're naturally tend to be selfish. Like we're looking for our self-interest. And then when you say, well, now I have to take care of myself, that almost, it's another way we cut ourselves off from people and the feeling that we get when we help somebody else. Like, maybe instead of just going hard the pain in self-care, we have to start caring about other people, because when you go and you help that elderly neighbor or you beautify your neighborhood, you feel fucking amazing because you've met people and now it looks better and you've done something great in the world and you've influenced somebody else and now you've got friends, and it's just like your world changed because instead of just being so focused on yourself and saying, well, I have to take care of me. Maybe we should start saying more, we have to take care of other people. Not for the selfish interest of like trying to make yourself feel better, like, well, I'm going to do it for me, but just for the genuine, authentic feeling that you get when you say, hey, I'm going to help you with this.
I think it's really important when we think about health and self-care that social
Yeah.
health be included right next to physical and mental. Like social health has a huge aspect, a huge role to play in our mental health for sure, and somewhat even in our physical health. Man, I saw a crazy diagram the other day. It was cool. It was like, here's interactions on the street with minimal traffic. Here's, and it diagrammed like where people were moving across the street. Here's with more traffic, and here's with more traffic, and you could see where the interactions between households on foot was a tight knit fabric where there wasn't much traffic, and you're like, oh my god, those people are walking so much more, visiting so much more, experiencing so much more community versus a street where there's high traffic and high speed. And how, what a different lifestyle those people are going to have, and absolutely, whole different life just from that one indicator. So social health has to be, thought of alongside, because it's such a big part of our lives and whether or not we're happy.
Yeah, and I think it'd be really interesting though to see if on some how can we on some of these big planning projects and strategies, how can we include these small acts into those? Because in the backdrop of this advent calendar stuff going, we have projects that we're working on at Civic Brand that some of them are these big planning projects, and we're working with a community on a place branding strategy and what things can go in this bond, and it's going to be huge things. And it's like, so I'm kind of seeing these two things happening. We're doing this small acts every day and then this big thing, and it's like, if we could bring those together, because like this is going to have impact today, this is going to have impact in 15 years, right? How can we take some of that effort and money and invest it into encouraging some of these smaller acts? Like, how can a city include in their strategic plan small things? Like, it doesn't have to be big things, even if you're doing a big strategic plan. Does
Yeah,
that make sense?
I was driving in the car today and I was thinking about that. Like, what if a city, just as an example, what if a city said to any business in our downtown, we will give you 2 grand and we'll send somebody over to set you up an online store. Like, to all these little small businesses that don't have an online capability, you know what? We'll give you a $2,000 grant to set up this online store. The only requirement is that you keep up the online store, you keep it up to date for the next 12 months. If you don't, you forfeit that $2,000 and it goes to the next business. Like, what if you did that on a large scale? And now you got your entire downtown with like an online ordering presence. You have just dramatically changed the world because of this simple $2,000 gift. Like, hey, now people can order from you just as easily as they can order from Amazon because you've given them $2,000 and you've set them up with something that is a really, really powerful tool.
Yeah, we did a project in Little Elm, Texas, with their lakefront district economic development, and we created and branded this accelerator program that was almost what you're talking about, where every month we had about a $2,000 a month budget, and every month the businesses in the district would all fill out a Google form to apply, to try to get help with their marketing. And we'd pick one business a month, and our team would go in and sit down with them and be like, all right, what do you need? How can we spend this $2,000 to help you market and promote your business? And it was super cool because, businesses are at all different stages. So like one business, all they needed was better photos. And, so we just took a bunch of photos. Another business, they needed to completely get on social. They weren't even there at all. So we got them set up. And, another one needed signage. And so we helped them with that. And I think, yeah, I mean, it was a drop in the bucket compared to an analogy I always like to use for cities is like, how much do you spend just in gas a day on all your like city vehicles?
Yeah.
So like line item wise, we're talking pennies, and when cities do spend money on like, hey, we want to improve our district, they'll spend 50 grand on some weird statue that no one's going to take a picture in front of, no one's going to go to and visit. And you could take that money and do smaller tactical things with it.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's where, right. I mean, it's like, well, we have this pot of money, we have to spend it, and we know how to traditionally spend it. And it's like, yeah, but you're forgetting the part of where you have to encourage 20,000 people to care about their town more. And because that's not a real obvious fix. Like paying for a plan is easy, paying for a statue is easy, fixing up a park is easy. How to get 20,000 people to care is not.
Yep.
I try to tackle that in the Civic Pride workshops, where it's like, okay, look, let's talk about what it means over these 6 categories, whether it's aesthetics or sense of community or ownership. Like, let's talk about what those mean and how those can be executed. And right on site, it's like, okay, we're going to create 6 committees from the people that are here. And actually, I want you to call and start emailing other people in the community right now, not later, not tomorrow. We don't need a meeting to do this. Like, call and email people right now and start to put together that committee or that project team. And here's what you're going to do. Every day somebody on that team has to do something: snap a picture, put it online, and tag it. Whatever, we're the beauty committee or something, I don't know what that was. And have a competition. Like, if all 6 of these committees are each day sort of, we did a little something, I bought a cup of local coffee, here's a picture, and I put it up. And if you're competing with that, with those other committees, that was kind of my idea. And I've seen it starts to happen. It starts to work. Like, this feels good. I see where, and then it all of a sudden is self-documenting too, that in the process of being a little competitive and saying we did something, you're starting to see like, oh shit, there's things happening every single day to hit these 6 areas, and it's starting to get better. So because you have to use tools and tricks, in essence, it's just not a money problem. All right, let's shift up. John Paget with First and Main Films put out a piece this week on Proud Place, or last week on Proud Places, about branding and kind of the problems with community branding, and this idea that everybody needs to brand a brand. We're all a personal brand, and that a city can't be so simply branded. That's a tricky thing, that a city's a complicated place, and why we maybe sometimes over subscribe to the idea that if we just get the right brand, the stuff will all be better. People will flock to our town and love our town. And particularly interested in feedback from you two, since you both work in that field more than I do. So Ryan, what were your, as somebody that does a lot of community branding, like, how did that land with you?
Yeah, no, I loved it because I'm a branding guy. That's what we do, is we help communities brand each other, or brand themselves. But he hit the nail on the head, because most people do branding the wrong way. And so, when he's calling out branding the wrong way. Just like when you call out tourism and economic development, there's nothing wrong with tourism. There's nothing wrong with economic development. It's the way that most people are doing those things is what's wrong. And so, yeah, he hit the nail on the head. It's about stories, which is Phil's whole thing. It's about a lot of different stories, and collectively they make the community. A line I use all the time. There's 2 things that I use all the time when we talk to communities that I think speak to the same idea. The one is, the greatest cities in the world are really just collections of neighborhoods, right? So like New York, Manhattan, it's not because it's Manhattan, it's because it's Little Italy and Chelsea and Soho and all these different things. So you can't brand Manhattan. It's this diverse collection and all these different things. The other analogy that I always use is, if you take a corporate brand, even like Toyota, I've said this a million, every presentation we do, we say this of, when Toyota's building their brand, they have people that want to buy trucks and they need to be driving through the mud. They have people that drive Prius and they need to be environmentally friendly. They have minivans. They have all these different audiences, completely different goals. How could you possibly put them under one umbrella? And I think my response is, well, branding's role is to find, well, what's the common thread? Your guy who's driving through the mud in his truck and the person in the Prius, completely different, but they both want quality and dependability. That's a shared value. And you build the brand on that. So like Toyota, they build their brand on quality and dependability, and then they let the marketing go in all these different directions. You can go market the truck, and I think that's where people that do branding wrong. They're really just trying to do marketing. They're not really trying to do branding. Branding gets at the core of like who you are, and sometimes more importantly, who you're not. But yeah, I think the way you do that is through telling stories, which Phil, I mean, that's your whole deal.
Yeah, I think too, like, I love even just the title of John's piece with the beyond branding, because like branding is where you start. Like you have your brand identity, you've got your graphics. Like that's the beginning, and you have to continually build on that, and that's where marketing comes in. But a lot of cities have this impression that branding is the end. Like, well, it took us 3 months or 6 months or 12 months to finally get our brand package together. And now we've got our branding. Now all we have to do is like put that logo in front of people like a magical talisman. And like people see this logo and then they're immediately drawn to our city because they saw this really expensive logo that we spent a lot of money on. And they expect it to just be this machine that works automatically for them without any further work. But that's not the role and function of branding. Branding isn't a machine that will pull people into your small businesses. Like that's where marketing comes in, and people don't understand that takes work, and that takes time and energy and skill and talent and all of these things for a really, really long time for that to be effective. It's not, branding isn't a set it and forget it, like boom, we got our logo and let's move on to other things. Like you've got to continually feed it and nurture it, and building those stories on top of the branding is where that magic happens.
Yeah. No brand, every brand means nothing on day one. The greatest Nike, Apple, on day one, it was nothing. It's consistent storytelling. It's fulfilling promises over and over, all those things. And,
That's a good
John's
way
is-
to put it, the fulfilling promises. I've been thinking through this a lot lately with my, with Revitalize or Die too. And I hadn't thought of that language, but right. Like, at best, your brand actually helps you. Plenty don't. Plenty brands are either neutral or worse. But right, like once you have it out there, you have to fulfill the promises that it's making every day. If somebody sees that and thinks like, oh, that's what it means to me, you constantly have to be coming back and saying like, you're right, because of this story, because of this reason, because of all these other items, that promise holds up to be truthful, because all these other things underneath the sort of infrastructure or substructure are also true.
right.
And I will say too, like in the second part of his article, he makes the point that the stories are what makes your city you. And in like marketing, we talk about what's your value proposition, or what's your position, what makes you different, what's the differentiator. And if you have this idea that branding is the end game, lots of cities have logos. Like, well, this city has a logo and that city has a logo. Which city has a better logo? Like if that's the position you're going to take, yeah, like you're going to overestimate the importance of branding, because now it's a logo competition.
Right.
But if you decide we are the city we are, built by the people that are here, and that's what makes us amazing and special and different, that's how you differentiate yourself from all of these other places. But if your slogan is like live, work, play, and the city down the road is live, work, play, like why would I ever think about you as a different kind of city?
Right.
Like you haven't told me anything, you haven't shown me anything, you haven't shown me you. But if I see the nitty gritty details and like, wow, that seems like a place with a great vibe, like that's compelling to me as a human being, and that's a community that I want to become a part of.
But what if the one had a clock tower? I'm just saying.
Maybe I'm really into clocks and that's my jam.
Yeah. I almost wish logos didn't exist, because it confuses everybody. We get hyper focused on, when we hear branding, we think the logo. And, when people say, what's your favorite brand? A lot of people say like, oh, Apple, I love Apple. They're never talking about the little Apple icon on the back of their computer. They're talking about how it feels when you walk in the store and how the user experience. And, I think, Phil, we're going to talk about Storyville in a bit, and the Storyville brand, like you've got a new logo, but that's like one of the lowest things on the priority list of like, what is Storyville? It's your identity and who you are and the value you provide to your customers. And so,
go ahead, Phil.
I'll give you just a quick example because it's sitting right here. So this camera is made by a company called Leica, and for a long time I thought it was overhyped. It was too expensive. Like it was all of these things, like whatever. Like it's just a very pretentious company. And then one day I decided to rent one just to see it, like what the hype was. And it came in this box, and you open the box, and when you open the box, like you pull this little tab, and they've constructed the box in such a way that when you pull the tab, all the flaps like fall open like a flower or like a machine. It goes boom.
Like
And
butterflies and
then
stuff. Like,
yeah, and then there's this box inside a box, and then you open it up, and it slides out in a drawer, and then you pull out this camera, and like just the feeling of this camera is like nothing else in my life that I've experienced in a material thing. Like that's marketing, and
Right.
that's the story. And then you hear about Leica and how they invented the 35 millimeter camera. Like look at the history. Like they are OG. Like they've been around since the very beginning, and they create this camera. And I knew from like this time I opened the box that I was done, and my bank account was done, and that I would never shoot another camera because it connected me in a different way. I don't think about this little red dot. There's a little red dot on the front. No, not on this one, but a little red dot on the front of
Yeah.
Leica cameras. I don't think about that red dot. I think about everything around that red dot, and that to me is what makes compelling marketing.
as you were picking it up, I completely thought it was a handgun, and I was like, "This is getting really weird. I don't know where Phil
Yeah,
is going
I mean,
with this."
like look at this handgun. Boom,
Look
it's
at
like
Yeah, I was like,
bazooka.
strange.
Now we're introducing guns into our podcast.
Yeah, like wow, different. Yeah. I want to kind of before we move on to the Storyville, I just want to to give to think through it to talk about what have you seen as a community just crushing it, like going like okay, yeah, we have our logo, but then really just getting it all right, bolstering it, fulfilling those promises, doing all the legwork behind that. When people then saw that logo, they're like, yeah, that's exactly right. Like do you guys have a great example of how a community has done it just right?
I mean, trying to think of an example we weren't involved with, but I will toot our own horn for a minute.
I
Just 'cause
expected as much. I mean, come on.
yeah. Tell me about you.
What's your personal brand, Ryan?
Yeah, my personal brand actually is a good example. No, we did a project in Two Rivers, Wisconsin, and I shared their thing because the home of the ice cream sundae. So today was the history thing on the Advent, and I shared that they were the home of the ice cream sundae. And I've used them as a lot of examples in the podcast because it's your classic, like there was a big factory in the town, it went away, they lost their entrepreneurial spirit and their creativity. And so we did a branding project with them. It was a year long. The first 6 to 7 months, we didn't design a single thing. We just listened. We just went there, listened to stories, talked to business owners, and we discovered that, man, they have this amazing creative and entrepreneurial history. And, people think that they have lost that. And so we started looking at their history and really kind of putting together not logo ideas, but brand principles. And so the two that surfaced was this idea of like timeless and true. Like, they're not trying, it's a community. They're really prideful, almost to a fault. Sometimes they don't want to toot their own horn because, they're humble. They're really true to who they are. They're not trying to like impress people to come to their town. Everything they do is very quality and timeless. And so we really latched on to those things and helped them with like this True to Two, because it's Two Rivers. So it's like this hashtag True to Two campaign, and just seeing how businesses and residents have kind of latched on to that like idea and messaging. The logo is just like the red dot on the camera. It's just like an ornament that's just there to like remind you, oh yeah, that's that. And so I do think that the design part is important because it's that consistency. You like every time you see that, you're reminded of those feelings you have. But it's the feelings that are the brand. And so I think they've just done a really good job of like, being true to who they are. And so the brand and the designs that came out of it, I mean, we created this like Made in Two Rivers brand, and it feels like a vintage kind of 50s ice cream shop kind of vibe. And it's just right on with, I think, who they are. So in my opinion, that's a good example.
Yeah, talking about consistency, there's a city a few miles south of here called Frankenmuth. It's Little Bavaria, and the logo I believe is just the word Frankenmuth in this kind of gothic typeface. And if that was it, and there was just like a couple little German places in Frankenmuth, like it wouldn't carry the same weight. But in Frankenmuth, there's actually a code that if you build a new building, it has to look like it's from Germany. And so the McDonald's looks like it's from Bavaria. The hotels look like it's from Bavaria. They built this relatively new little, almost outdoor shopping uh, mall, but it's constructed like a little German village. And so the shops are actually like, they look like houses, and you walk over this little bridge over this little trickling stream that actually goes into the real river. And like the cohesiveness as like a tourist town is really, really powerful. Like it's just, they do such a great job, because everything fits together. And I mean,
Yeah.
their brand influences their codes. And
Yeah.
so they've used this brand to influence actual physical decisions in the city, and say, you cannot build a building here if it doesn't fit our city's brand. Like that's
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
hardcore they are
Right.
into this brand. And that's why it works, because when you go into Frankenmuth, it's going to look like little Bavaria, and you're going to get your Wiener Schnitzel, and they're going to have beer fest, and you're going to have all this other, you're going to go get some cheese from the cheese place. And like, what to expect, because the brand is there. You don't walk down Frankenmuth Street and see a McDonald's built like every other McDonald's, and like it's sticking out like or a
Yeah.
Target, like boom, cheers Target in the middle of little Bavaria. But if you do see that Target or that McDonald's, it's gonna fit the theme, it's gonna fit the brand.
So you're suggesting that every town should, in essence, try to replicate a Bavarian village? Is that what
Yes.
I'm picking
Yeah.
up?
Or you pick your European country if you want. Like you can do
Okay.
little
Okay.
France or little
Smart.
Portugal.
That's sweet. I've been to Frankenmuth a number of times, and
Have you really?
yeah. I mean, it's super gimmicky. It's also like pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, and see, and that's the thing. Like Frankenmuth is not necessarily. I love people in Frankenmuth. Nothing against them, but like Frankenmuth is not necessarily my jam. Like I don't drive down on the weekend to hang out at Frankenmuth, but it's an example of like a tourist town doing something really, really well and saying, "Hey, this is our brand. This is who we are. We're
Right.
gonna own this."
And imagine if it was authentic in essence. I mean, imagine
Hmm.
if it was, instead of sort of replicating another town, if that was like they were so pure in their own kind of roots that like this is the material that we will only
Yep.
ever use because that's what was here. And
Yep.
so yeah, it's a good example. So Phil, I've seen some you're on the interwebs lately making some noise.
Making some moves.
Yeah, so moving away a little bit from the business social media marketing to doing it for places, for cities, huh? Storyville Social. By the way, it looks fantastic. I'm very excited for you.
Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, I think it really gets to this point of going beyond a brand and really digging into what makes a place special, which you and I mean, this is the space where you and I think we first bumped into each other on the internet,
Hmm.
as kind of railing against traditional tourism and marketing being so outwardly focused, and nobody focuses internally. Nobody thinks about what can we do to make our city love our city. Like, how do we celebrate the people that actually call this place home? And so it's really, really cool to see Storyville Social out there. So could you give us a little rundown on what's happening?
Yeah, so Storyville Social tells the stories of cities or regions or counties, however you want to package that, through writing, photography, videography, and podcasting. And then all of that content that I create gets posted automatically to the government or the city organization's social media feeds, so Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, or Twitter. And it's really trying to help people on that second half. So I don't deal with branding. I don't go into a city and give them a branding package. I'm kind of the reinforcements after. Like, so you have this branding and you have this kind of idea of who you are. Now I deal with the implementation side of things and say, hey, I'll be the storyteller for you. So it's through kind of a mixed media approach, because I was formerly with like a new kind of a hyper local news organization that only told stories through kind of your traditional news articles. And so I was sending all these writers out to cover these stories and take pictures and things like that. We post them to a website, and we'd use social media just to say, hey, check out the story on our website. And as we were doing those stories, I saw nobody was really reading them. Like people would occasionally comment on Facebook or whatever, but I could tell immediately they didn't read beyond the headline snippet that they saw on Facebook. They didn't actually go over to the article. And then you look at the website traffic, you're like, wow, we're spending hundreds of man hours every single month to tell these stories, and there's not a single person that's reading them, or there's like 4 people that are reading them, or there's 14. Every once in a while we get a popular story and it'd be seen by 300 people, but by and large, like, nobody was reading them. And in this world, if nobody sees your story, it doesn't exist. Like, all that work that you've done is zero. And so that really got me thinking, is like, how you present your stories is as important as the story itself. And so the world has changed. People used to sit down and read the newspaper for a half hour every morning because that was how they were trained and that was the world that they grew up in. But the world that we're in right now is boom, 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 boom. I'm scrolling. Like, we're just inundated with all this, like, really fast, immediately absorbable content. And so my thinking was, what if we take the stories that can change the world and we package it and present it in a way and in forms of media that people want to consume? And that is, I think, where the magic happens, because you take these stories that nobody is telling, that everyone should hear, and you give it to people on a platform that they're already using on an average of 6.5 hours every single day for free. So you don't have to charge them. There's no buy-in. They don't have to download an app. There's literally no obstacle to these people reading these stories. And what if you told these stories every single day on a platform that 90% of your community uses for almost 7 hours a day? Like, that's how you change perception. And that was really the idea for Storyville Social, was like, how do we tell these stories, but then in a way that cities can actually tell the stories. So you're not going to a city and saying, hey, here's even more work to do. You're doing the work for them. I mean, it's just, it makes so much sense. And, like, to talk to Jeff, to your point about the focus on the citizens, it's like, if you're a business, you can constantly chase new customers, but what if you treated 100 customers like they were kings, to the point where they came in every single day for lunch? Like, you'd never need to chase down a new customer, because you know that every single day for lunch, you've got 100 people coming through that door. That's all you need. You just need 100 people buying lunch every single day, and you can run that business for the next 50 years of your life if you want to, because you know that you're going to be able to keep the doors open. And that's exactly a city. Like, what if a city of 25,000 people turned 10,000 of those people into raving super fans that bought local and went out to eat every single, or 3 times a week? They went to council meetings, they were on committees and boards because they just absolutely loved where they lived. You don't have to chase people then. Like, it's really, really hard to get new customers. It costs a lot of money, a lot of time. You have no idea if it's actually going to turn them into new customers or not. But if you turn people into super fans that will live and support and breathe and word of mouth market your city and every single thing that you do, that's a win. And that's, in the world of marketing, relatively easier or considerably easier to do than constantly chasing outside sources of income and investment and talent and things like that.
And in its execution, I wanted you to talk a little bit about Saginaw and what you've seen and done there. Because, yeah, I mean, as you were approaching that again was kind of right when we were first
Mm-hmm.
chatting. But I guess what I've seen from that is, most cities approach it like, here are our amenities, low taxes,
Yes.
nice place to live. We've got a waterfront, etc. I'm like, okay, that's nice. What you're doing is like, oh, I'm falling in love. I'm seeing that these people that live here, like I love them. I love their story. I'm emotionally involved now with the people that I found that I share a community with because they're so beautiful. They have these, whether it's heart wrenching or powerful or sort of inspirational stories that's all swept traditionally that's all been swept aside, like whatever,
Yes.
who gives a shit about that. Let's tell people about our new water treatment facility. And
Right.
you are rolling out these stories of beauty and inspiration, and that's where people fall in love, and that's what attaches somebody to their town. That's what makes them want to show up to a council and say, like, God damn it, this isn't good enough for these incredible people I'm sharing a place with. And man,
Yeah.
it's incredible.
Yeah, I'm gonna steal a line from John Paget's article in that he said something like, "Your city is not a bag of chips." And when we focus on stuff and things, we turn our cities into bags of chips. Like we got a really big bag of chips, or we spent a lot of money on this bag of chips, or look at this bag of chips, it's extra crunchy. Like, don't you guys like extra crunchy chips? And we just keep saying that over and over again, and then wonder why our community sucks. It's like, because you're turning your city into a bag of chips, but your city is actually people. Like, it's actually people that are doing amazing things every single day. They care and they love and they experience and they overcome and they work every single day. And that's what makes your city a city. And so when I started working with Saginaw, like Saginaw is, it is gritty. Like the people are fierce. Like I tell people all the time, like I love so many cities in the world, but there is something in the dirt and water in Saginaw that makes it a place like none other. And it produces some of the world's finest people. And I knew, like I lived in Saginaw for a few years, but now I live in Bay City. And I knew if I went into Saginaw and I tried to paint it as a city that it wasn't, I would get run out of town in an hour. They would have called me out right away and said, "That's not Saginaw. You're not from here." And I did get some of that initially when I signed the contract and it was in the news and things like that. People are like, why is this Bay City dude coming to our home and telling our stories? And so my approach was, well, I'm just going to completely remove myself from the equation, and I'm just going to provide a platform that amplifies all of these people's stories. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to sit down and interview that coffee shop owner and say, tell me your story. And then I take that story and then I tell that story. Minimal extra words from me. I try to go almost 100% quote based. That way there I'm completely out of the picture. It's a true story told by that person. I'm the technician behind the scenes that translates it from spoken word into social media content. So I try to remove myself from that equation so that it's not Phil trying to create a brand of Saginaw or bend it or twist it. Like every single day, these are actually the people here, actually their stories. And so that was a giant influence of the work. And some of it was protection, just job protection, because I wanted to do it right and I wanted to make sure that I was continuing the contract. And then when you saw the results of it and how people just like their engagement and enthusiasm about hearing the stories of their neighbors just exploded. I mean, over the last year, posts about Saginaw, is a very poor city. It's one of the only cities in the entire nation that has a tax cap, and that tax cap was established in 1979. And so the city is bringing in as much money as it was in 1979, not accounting for inflation. So there, every year that goes by, the city gets poorer and poorer because the money buys less. And over the last year, the posts have been seen over 11 million times. Because it's real people, real stories, no bullshit. It's just saying, here's the city of Saginaw. If you like us, awesome. If not, we're cool with that because we like us. And you just keep telling those stories over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And that, I think, like, to me, as far as marketing a city, it's the only way. I would never do it differently because it applies to every single city. Like whether you're a city of 1,000 people or you're a city of 1 million people, this approach works. the template works, the philosophy works, the techniques work. Like you can drag and drop it to any single city that you want, because like whether you're a town of 1,000 or 1,000,000, you have the same stories to tell because there's people there and people create stories.
Yeah, I think that's such an important part because we've seen so many communities that we work with that think, we don't have a story or our
Yep.
stories aren't good enough. And they really do believe it. And they think that they don't have. And then we get in there and we start talking to people and you're like, no, I mean, you might have to mine for them, but there's some diamonds in there and you tell those stories. And then the other stories start coming out of the woodwork. And so I think that's the biggest like mental hurdle for a lot of communities is they're so beaten down that they think, well, we don't have stories to tell, or ours aren't
Yep.
good enough. And so if they do try to tell stories, they try to tell false stories or they try to be something they're not. And so I think that's so huge.
And that's also an indicator to me that that community needs to reconnect with itself, because that was a question that was posed to me the day that I signed the contract with Saginaw. Somebody asked me as I was walking out of the office, they said, do you really think that we have enough stories to tell? And I said, oh, you wait. Like,
Yeah.
just wait, you just wait and see. And that's a signal to me that before you start chasing somebody from San Francisco, like, well, we got to get tech jobs and startup jobs, and like we want to be the new Silicon Valley, or we got to get, we got to reach from the coasts. Like, before you do any of that bullshit, you have to look at your community and say, do we need a stronger community? Do we have to reconnect people to where they live? How would we benefit from having more pride here? Like, if you can say, like, we've got an amazing community, check. We have 100% pride. Everybody loves ourselves, check. Like, if you can check all those boxes, then sure, like, you have a reason to start looking elsewhere. But man, just it shakes me to the core, the amount of potential that cities have,
Right.
that they're just sitting on, like, not intentionally. I mean, some cases maybe intentionally, but they're just sitting on all of these stories. Like, you have the raw materials to literally change the world of these people. Like, we experience the world through our communities, right? And so if we change our communities, we change people's worlds. Their lives change. Like, what if we changed economic development corporations into life-changing corporations?
Oh.
And instead of focusing on money, we focus on people's lives. How can we make people's lives better? That's the only question that you
Stupid.
ask. That's the only philosophy that you have. How do we make these people's lives better? You will be the world's greatest city.
Yeah, yes. I mean, all 100% true. And as sort of a civic pride fanatic, like, it's such an important part that
Yep.
most of these, the points that you both made were about lack of city self-esteem. That, and that's the case with almost every city. Look, you've got 50 years of bad news. You got 50 years of people talking shit on you, and things getting worse, of the things that mattered, the buildings that mattered deteriorating, the ownership of, these great businesses going away, these legacies evaporating. Like, yeah, if that was the same, if people just talk shit on you personally, Phil or Ryan, for a decade, you'd feel pretty low about yourself.
Yep.
And when it came to get out there in the world, you're like, hey, what's great about you? You're like, nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. I'm bad. I don't have anything to offer.
Yeah.
And that's how all these cities feel. It's like, well, my family is I've got this. It's like, if thinking about your family, like, if all you ever heard was bad stories about your family too, you'd have a very low self-opinion, or opinion of your family. You'd have low self-esteem. So that is the beauty of this. It's like, yeah, most cities do have self-esteem issues. There's only a handful of San Franciscos and Manhattans that everybody tells them how great they are every day. Everybody else is kind of relegated to the shadows, and they have to overcome their lack of self-esteem. They have to believe in themselves, and that comes through the storytelling of, like, look, we're actually full of a bunch of beautiful, amazing, talented,
Yes.
inspirational people. Our community is, like, overflowing with incredible people, but we've ignored them for so long in hopes of bringing other people in. And we tell those stories. We're not, we're rebuilding our self-esteem. We're making us confident in ourselves so that we can so we can get out of bed, so we can go to the gym, so we can, land a new job, and all those things that, like, only come by building self-esteem, by having that confidence.
And the most powerful thing about all of this is that they're 100% true. Now, somebody might be lying to me during a story, like I don't go through and fact check. Like, did you actually start this coffee shop in 1982? Like, did you actually start it with 1,000? Like, I don't go through and fact check it, but they're 100% true. It's not contrived. When I signed the contract initially, the word that the news used a lot was changing the narrative, and I hated that. Like, if like one hand, like I get it. Like, you're
Mhm.
changing the narrative. The city didn't have a great reputation, whatever. Change that narrative. But you're actually, for the first time, telling the actual narrative. You're not changing it. You're actually telling it, because before then, like, what was the reputation? It was governed by the local news, or as of like Facebook groups, and like people just like bitching all the time about things because that's what we love to do on the internet. Like, that's what the story that was being told, and that's not real. Like, that's fake. That's not the actual story of the city. So for the first time, you're actually starting to tell in a public way the real story of the city. You're starting to balance the scales towards truth. And that's the powerful thing. I'm not, you're not manipulating people through, nifty branding and advertising. And
Right.
it's not propaganda. It's, for the first time, you're telling the truth. And that, I think, is one of the most powerful things about good, true storytelling.
Yeah, and I think the other side of that helps cities realize that, because like we just said, every city does have a story, right? They do have these stories, even if they think they don't. I think the other side of it is realizing that the problems that they have are also not unique to them, that all these other
Yep.
cities have problems. And Jeff, when you talk about, like, comparing it to like a person and self-esteem, somebody like, oh, I'm not good enough, I have these problems. When they realize that all these other people have similar problems or different problems, like we mentioned San Francisco as, like, not every city's as cool as San Francisco. San Francisco has its own problems,
Yeah.
like it's got plenty of problems. And I think that's another thing that helps cities get over it, is like, you do have stories, and yes, you have problems, but you know what? Your problems are not because of you. Like, every city
Yep.
has this problem.
Yep.
So let's get over that and start telling these stories.
And that good stories and bad stories can coexist. You can tell a great story of a city and say, look at what our city has. That doesn't intrinsically negate the bad things the city has. You can have an amazing business district in the city while at the same time tackling an issue that you have with crime. Those two things can coexist. You can say, I love my city, while at the same time acknowledging that every city has good stories and bad stories. You're not walking through life with rose-colored glasses and say, "Whoa, Bay City, Michigan is just the most perfect place you ever did
Right.
see. I just love it here." Like,
Right.
you can say, like, I love the city that I live in, to the point where I will publicly acknowledge when we're not doing something well. And that's true love. I mean, you look at every true love relationship, is like, my wife doesn't love me because I'm perfect, because I am not. But the love says, you know what? I'm going to stick with you even though you really suck at doing the dishes. And like,
That's
that's love.
such a good point too, because like, yeah, we don't just sit down every night and watch comedies or inspirational movies. We watch a lot of tragedies. And while that
Yeah.
story might not paint your community in the best light, it's still an important story. It still makes you who you are. And to at least tell it, and to be honest about, hey, like, it hasn't always been great here. I mean, the collapse of,
Yep.
yeah, the steel industry is a pretty fascinating, I mean, it's a tragic story around here, but to pretend it didn't happen, pretend we're not still dealing with it, would be dishonest. And that's what gives it its grittiness, that and tenacity. And like, the people that are still here are going to be a hell of a lot tougher because they stuck around.
My favorite movie of all time is Almost Famous. And it's basically the story of this kid that becomes a rock journalist, and he tours with this band, writing an article for Rolling Stone. And on one of his first assignments, he just went to the back of this event center, and he was waiting for the band, and he met this groupies. And one of the leader of the groupies, her name is Penny Lane. And Penny starts talking to him, and she asks him how old he is, and he tells her a number, because he was like 11. He said, like, I'm 17. She was like, how old are you really? He's like, I'm 15. And she said, how old are you really? And he told her age, and she said, the truth just sounds different, doesn't it? And so when a city decides to finally tell the truth, it just sounds different.
Hmm.
Like, we are people surrounded in a world full of bullshit. And so when you finally see someone or a place or a business that is willing to tell the truth, it just sounds different. And on a human level, that creates an immediate connection of trust. I can trust these people because they're willing to talk about the things that make them amazing, as well as the things that make them not so amazing. And that's a human being or a place or a business that I can throw my hat in the ring with because I know I can trust them. But if I feel like I'm being manipulated or if I'm trying to be sold to, I'm going to run away from that, or I'm going to be intrigued for a day or a week or a month, and then I'm going to quit because I don't have time for that. And I don't have time for fakery and bullshit and mindlessness. I want something that's true.
Yeah, can't think of a better way to wrap this up than the truth just sounds different, man. All right, thanks, Phil. That is, incredibly excited. I love it. I think it's clearly you're in the right spot for you, and you're passionate about what you're doing, and you're doing something that's so important for cities. So,
Thank
good for
you.
you. All right. Oh, Phil's back. He can do the wrap up.
So if you're listening to this podcast, please connect with us on social media on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, where we're putting out new content every single day. Follow us, like that stuff, share it, because what we're really about here at Proud Places is helping you fan the flames of community development and connection and bettering your city. We want to be a resource for you to change the world of the people inside your community. So connect with us on social media. Head to our website, proudplaces.com, where you can see all the new current content as well as troll all the past resources that we provide there. And we would love to have you become part of this really amazing grassroots organic family that we're trying to create here at Proud Places.
Yeah, thanks, Phyllis.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.